In the beginning, there was time and space, and then God created the universe. And because of God, we have games like Fable. We have the beloved Peter, who created the Fable series. And personally, I love the Fable games. I know a lot of people have grown sour on them over the years. A lot of people like to make fun of Peter and what happened to Lionhead Studios because of his ambition, his creativity, and let's be honest, he hyped up a lot of the Fable games and they didn't always reach their full potential, especially when you look at the third game. But now we are getting Fable back into the mainstream. We're getting a Fable, reboot, and that's coming out at the end of this year, maybe, or next year. But the actual core people behind the Fable game are actually working on their own game set in the same universe, the same franchise as Fable, Albion, okay? And this is called Masters of Albion. And pretty much nobody is talking about this game whatsoever.
What?
And it's very surprising to me. Perhaps I'm alone in this and not many people care about the original classic Fable games. I loved them, okay? They were my first introduction to RPGs back in the day, back when I was a kid. Playing Fable 1 on the original Xbox was such a transformative experience for me. And this series, although jank, although kind of old school, it has so many cool ideas. So today I'm going to be taking a look at Masters of Albion. So sit back, get cozy, because this is a video I'm very passionate to be talking about. I'm just happy to be talking about this because I love Fable so much. Like I said, it was the game to introduce me to the possibilities of RPGs. And in some ways, it was kind of the introduction to the genre of fantasy, this archetype storytelling of good versus bad. What I loved about Fable was the morality system was so kind of black and white. To me, it made the gameplay so interesting because it was very clear when you were going down, either a good playthrough or a bad playthrough. And the morality system was kind of the thing that birthed, morality systems in gaming, and then, went on to influence things like Fallout, Mass Effect, all of that kind of stuff.
I'm a nerd. So am I!
And the new Fable reboot that I already discussed why I'm worried about it is kind of shying away from that aspect, where morality now is going to be subjective, it's not going to be a universal morality system. And I'm going to talk about more of the philosophy aspects of Fable and why this matters to me so much, the deontology aspect of Fable. But today my main focus is to give you a Masters of Albion early access review. Now this is based on all the early access that we've had as press. Some of us got to see some of the game hands-on from a kind of online version of the game. But it is actually releasing into early access later on, so I can only go off the demo build that we have actually seen so far. And this video is not sponsored by them or anything like that. I just love these games, and seeing how promoted and how much hype there is around the new Fable game, produced by Microsoft and Xbox and all that kind of stuff. It's kind of crazy how no one is really talking about this game, how it's just not getting any attention. And that might be because of, Peter's track record, but it also might be because this is a God game, okay? And God games are not very popular anymore. In fact, it's kind of a dying genre. And just listen to Peter discuss why he's creating this game.
It's a withering genre of game. It's a small percentage of that pie chart of all games that people play. And for me, that would be incredibly sad to see it wither to nothing. And if we're going to reinvigorate it, then there has to be something special, there has to be something new, there has to be something fresh and innovational about what we present to the player. And that's what I believe Masters of Albion is.
The special thing about the classic Fable games, like 1 and 2, okay, is the charm and the ambience, like I said, the choices, and this is very much capturing that old school Fable. It's not new style Fable that we're getting. It's not, carrying on from Fable 3. It's going back. This is classic Fable. And for people like me who love Fable 1, Fable 2, Fable The Lost Chapters, This is so great because it's literally that game, but a new version of that game. And in a way, it is stuck in the past. It is being developed by what you could argue are kind of a boomer dev team. It's so awesome at the same time because it's the original people now, working on this, a AA indie experience. And these are, the same developers that worked on the previous Fable games, and seeing them all back together again is just so great.
Yeah, for me it's just nice to be able to work in that way that, well, I've always worked for most of my time in the games industry, but it's becoming rarer and rarer, I think, and certainly if you go to like a big corporate company or something, they can't embrace this.
They can't. There's a
can't
level of paranoia there that is
Well, and they have to
destructive as
plan,
hell.
everything has to be like pre-agreed and
Yeah.
backed up by data and all this sort of stuff, and by the time you get to that you've forgotten what you were even talking about anyway.
That's the thing that's lacking in modern day gaming and AAA games, is that passion, is that creativity, and you can tell that these people working on Masters of Albion actually care. But I do understand why some people maybe are not excited about this game, because if you look at it on the surface, you can tell it's going to be very rough around the edges. And from what I've actually seen so far, from the extended gameplay and all that stuff that has been shared to press, what I can say is it does seem to be very jank, and that is why it's releasing in early access. So it's up to you if you want to support a game knowing it's going to be janky, knowing that it's going to be a game that gets updated slowly over time. They're going for that kind of model because they've got so many ideas they want to add into this, and of course, with this team, ambition is always bigger than what is actually the end result with them. But what is here is actually pretty crazy stuff, and for old school fans of Fable, I think, this is just a no-brainer. It feels like we've gone back in time, that time hasn't passed, and it's literally, an Xbox-style game releasing today, and no other studio is doing that. It's kind of insane stuff. So I do hope you enjoyed this video. Subscribe if you are new, and if you're a returning wise one, thank you so much for coming back and watching another video. And yeah, just thank you for being here. Like the video, share it around, it does mean a great deal to me. And check out the music that I make on Spotify. That would also be awesome of you, or just support me in any way that you can. I do appreciate it a lot, and the wise ones. If you love deeper looks at games, analysis, early access reviews, philosophical videos, you're in the right place. Now, the first thing I want to say that has made me so excited about this game is the producer, the sound designer and music producer behind the original Fable games, okay, Russell, with Fable 1 and Fable 2, is back, okay? I cannot stress how much I love the Fable music, and as someone who has made some small soundtracks for some indie games, dynamic soundtracks are a lot more complicated than you might think, okay? And a good sound design, just think about Skyrim, think about Fable, think about how much these games wouldn't be nearly as popular without these amazing music producers, okay? Music is very underrated. He is such a master, an underrated master of creating ambience and a fantasy world that feels, like truly, like a fairy book, fantasy, a kind of fable. That's the whole point. That's the whole point of the Fable franchise. It's a, kind of storybook British idea of what fairy tales are, the idea of that kind of fantasy, but with a twist. The whole point is Fable is very, kind of crude humor, very kind of black and white, very, kind of shocking in the best possible way. So that's why you can go from kind of goofy moments to actually very dark, sinister moments or emotional moments. That's what I loved about the original Fable games. So I just wanted to stress that fact that it is the original people working on this game. Take a look, it's just great stuff if you are like me and you love the original games.
Every game that I ever do, the first thing that I do is get the ambient sound bed sounding realistic. So that's all the birds tweeting, all the countryside sounding good, all the rivers and streams, everything that makes a world come to life. That's the first thing that I approach. The big challenge is going from music which forms the bed of the game, so you've got all your ambient type music moving between different regions, so that's all your bed of ambient style music. This game also has a very script-led storytelling way of taking you through the game, so that you're not just playing the game as a god, you're also watching this story unfold.
I'm so excited for this. So the first positive is the art style, okay? The art style is pulled straight from the original classic Fable games, 1 and 2, okay? And it's crazy to me because no one is talking about this. No one seems to care about this game. And I can understand why. Like, if people want a next-gen experience, you know, look at Pragmata that just came out. I'm absolutely loving that game. But, you know, graphically, technologically, it's obviously in the past, okay? These developers are not making this game to keep up with trends. They're making it as a passion project, and it's stuff like this that really makes me interested in gaming. It makes me interested in the artistry that goes into games, the storytelling, the music, the thematics, and this studio obviously care about that a lot. Now, I would say graphically it is a little bit more updated. Think of it as kind of the Fable 1 remake, okay? It's kind of like an updated version of that game. And this is because it's being produced on mass scale. So this is in fact an open world game, even though it might not look like it. What you need to understand about Masters of Albion is it's a god game, and these games don't really exist anymore. It's kind of like the studio's kind of big bang moment. It's them going out with a flash because they're combining all of the games that they previously worked on, not just Fable, but their other God Hand games as well, and they're combining it all into this universe. So they're taking elements from all the games that they've worked on, making it into this game. So you have to understand that it's got elements of, you know, a city builder, a God mode, a God Hand game, and then also the classic Fable experience. And let me first talk about these different things, okay? So first of all, you have the city building elements, and from what I've seen so far, it looks pretty crazy. Think of it as Lego blocks, that you have all of these different elements, and then how you combine something creates that building, and then you can, you know, basically build on top of that. So you could have one gigantic building, like a giant fucking castle or something, that literally has elements of everything. But what you have to understand is that's not very practical. You need also housing for your citizens. You need to think about pollution levels, because pollution will actually interact with the environment and make the town, you know, more sick and just like more and more degraded and disgusting and stuff like that. You could build like a little primitive settlement, or you could build like a big industrial settlement. So the choice is really up to you, and they all have their own systems. If you remember Fable, you know, you can take part in jobs like blacksmithing, pie making, you know, like playing music. So all of these buildings have their own actual elements, like creating food, but you can also do this yourself, you know, by interacting with the world, creating pies. And this is because there's a quest-based system in this, and I'll talk about that more later, which is kind of crazy. So they've got a lot here. You can literally customize weapons, build, you know, your own unique weapons for you to actually use when you're controlling a hero. But this can all be done automatically as well. There's like chicken houses as well, where you can, you know, manage and produce farm animals and stuff like that. So that's the second positive. It's just the ambition and the scope, okay? So basically, think of the world being split up into different sections. So you've got your snowy mountains, you've got your coastal area, you've got your, you know, kind of forest areas. And it's all interconnected on this giant Albion map that you can just kind of zoom out, and you're literally looking at it as a map, as a person who has got these godlike abilities. And that is actually a whole storyline as well, which you'll carry and which you'll be following as you play. There's also dungeons and caves for you to explore, and you can go and explore these when you are actually taking over a hero's body. And it's kind of like Kunitsugami, which is one of my favorite games of all time. And that's a, you know, kind of like a wave-like tower defense game where you actually, you know, manage a certain character, and it's like a character action, you know, and it's a hack and slash action game, but with management, you know, gameplay of, you know, moving villages around, purifying stuff, and then, you know, deciding where they set up in order to defend a night wave of attacks and stuff like that. So I fucking love this gameplay style, okay? Not many games are doing anything like this. And then in nighttime, this is when enemies attack, okay? And it's gonna be like this, but there's also story elements, and different NPCs will have different quests tied to them. And when you discover a new location, there's going to be foundational elements of buildings when you discover a new area, and then you can kind of uncover them and then build off of that. And how you generate more, how you can build more, is by collecting resources, by making the townspeople happy. You can even punish criminals and all this kind of stuff. You can control the weather. So it truly does make you have like these godlike abilities. You can just fence people off if you wanted to. You could, you know, summon a fireball. You could crush them. You could chuck them into the ocean. So it's got a lot going for it, and some people might think it's going for too much, and you do have to understand the scope of this. Don't expect the world itself to be super detailed like a full Fable, you know, game that you go and explore. It's trying to go for that, but the actual world itself, when you are, you know, like embodying a hero, does look to be a rather barren experience to me. But there are still quests that you get, you know, but there are still quests for you to do. For example, you need to unlock these towers, which will then allow you to go into God mode and then unlock the next settlement. There's, like I said, dungeons to clear, bosses to fight. There's quests that you need to complete. Some NPCs will need help, and this is all very important. You need to collect, you know, NPCs, because this is what generates income for your town. This is what generates resources, you know, resource gathering and all this kind of stuff for your town. So it's got many systems on top of each other. So the Fable system of questing, exploring the world, exploring dungeons, stuff like that, and then the God Hand mode, where you can actually fight enemies during these night raids, but also it feeds into the storytelling and then the city building elements on top of everything. So it sounds like a lot, and it's going for that kind of, you know, Fable 1 art style, because this is the best way to manage the game world without it feeling too hyper-realistic, because obviously that would be quite difficult to pull off at this kind of scale and budget. But I really do like the systems that they have got in place.
I find really inspirational, especially when thinking about God games, because you can see over there's a little village, and that's full of life, it's full of bustling life, but I'm up here, I've got this God's view, and I can imagine reaching out with my hand can almost cover that whole village, and plucking a little house up and moving it over there, and that is the essence of what a God game is. And it's views like this that have really inspired me about that scale, the scale of going to from the intimate, from, you know, going to where you can see a leaf on a tree up to this God view, and nothing more inspirational than this view.
Okay, so now let's talk about some of the gameplay elements in this Fable mode, as it were, where you get to embody heroes. So basically, some characters you will be able to take control over fully, and then you will use them to talk with other townspeople, to fill out, you know, quests and stuff like that, to explore dungeons, and to further unlock your potential in this God mode, okay? So you can do pretty much everything in this style if you wanted to, but most of the time you do have to manage your NPCs and stuff like that by using the God mode ability. And different heroes have different stats. Some might be better at, you know, magic, the will. Some people might be better at strength. So expect some of those RPG elements from the original Fable game, but don't expect it to be in such detail, okay? I don't think there's a karma system from everything that I've looked at. I haven't seen a karma system. I think it's more of an overall, you know, implication of how your kind of mini civilizations and towns are doing, kind of like in Fable 3, instead of this deontology karma system. And I really like that in the older games. Basically, what deontology argues is every action has a moral consequences. If you think of Aristotle and, you know, like what is a good life and, you know, virtue ethics and stuff like that, deontology basically says that it doesn't matter about the, you know, kind of end result. So for example, you know, you might do something evil, but the end result is a net good for the world. You know, you might have to kill someone, for example, but then that person won't harm other people later down the line. So it looks like a pure morality, good, positive thing for the world if you do kill that person. For example, you know, a simple one is like, okay, what if you killed Hitler? Then none of this stuff would happen. But deontology is rooted in actions. As soon as you actually perform the action, it doesn't matter about the result. It's the action itself that has the virtue ethics and morality implications. And Fable is the direct manifestation of that philosophy. So anything that you do has morality tied to it. This is why you can actually, you know, physically change by your deeds and actions. You know, you can grow horns, or you can become more like an angel figure. That's why, you know, you can literally pay off your morality by doing just simple good deeds for the Church of Light, even though it's kind of a broken gameplay system. They really tied that into the core themes of Fable, and now that it's subjective, I'm worried that that stuff is going to be kind of forgotten. And you might think that sounds a little bit insane, Savior, you know, I don't think they're really thinking about this, but Peter is actually someone who thinks about these kinds of deeper, you know, philosophical questions when he's making a game. That's why he can often oversell something, because he's so ambitious with his titles. And you have to remember that the gameplay might be janky, but if you are a fan of, you know, Fable 1, Fable 2, I think you will enjoy this. The combat is very similar to that of Fable 1 Remake, where you basically, you know, chain up attacks and then you will get a combo boost and you can perform a certain action, but you can, you know, use your own weapons, your magic abilities. So it's not revolutionary, it's not groundbreaking, but you know, they do think about these systems. And now also it wrestles with the idea of existentialism, you know, like humans, our nature is basically that of, basically the human nature is untethered, and we have to discover our own purpose, our own will. But now that you're playing as someone with godlike abilities, it might then, you know, put into question what is free will and do you even have any. So it's playing with different elements, so it's adding on top of the morality questions that Fable has always been about, the core elements, you know, good versus bad, player choices. And I honestly do miss that. You know, you could argue it's a more simplistic design, you know, good character or bad character, compared to, you know, RPGs today like Baldur's Gate 3, where everything is much more you know, shades of grey instead of black or white. But honestly, this makes gameplay interesting, if you ask me, and not many games are doing that. So I do love that they are building on top of those thematic frameworks that made Fable 1 and Fable 2 so good. And there are going to be morality, you know, themes to how you manage your villagers, how you treat them, and, you know, how much you put them to work and stuff like that. So it does wrestle with those ideas as well. Like I said, you know, expect execution to be a bit janky to begin with, like it's going to be an early access title, and honestly it doesn't look that much different from a Fable 1 remake, which came out a long time ago at this point, and not much has changed. But the core systems are everything that we loved about Fable 1 and 2. So I would say that is a negative. That's the only thing I would say is, you know, they perhaps need more time to cook. I think it shouldn't really be early access. They should just let them cook for a longer period of time. But the team does feel a little bit rushed. So I understand why they can't do that, as they are all, you know, kind of getting up there in age and stuff like that, and it's difficult. And this is their big game to kind of, you know, send off the original franchise before, I guess, we get the reboot. So, you know, that is a negative, just with how simplistic combat looks to be, how simplistic the world is when you're exploring it compared to something like even classic Fable, because it's kind of on a micro level. But still, the world is more fleshed out than you might think when you are doing this traditional Fable style gameplay. I love the fact that you can zoom in and literally see all of these things happening in real time, so it's not just an illusion, it's not like a city management game, like you can actually see all of these characters doing their stuff. Exploration, it still does have that old school magic of going out there, finding a treasure chest, discovering, you know, like a puzzle element, or, you know, like a note in a bottle or something like that. And now you have the ability to inhabit other creatures as well, so you can do that. So there is a lot here, but it's just very simplistic in its design. But the next thing, which is a positive, is how much they are, you know, focusing on scope. So there is skill progression trees, which the other classic Fable games didn't have, with your god ability, with, you know, adding more just fun interactions with you and your villagers. You can even just like flip them off if you want, or do all of these kind of crazy things. You can become a, you know, vengeful god if you wanted to. And then there's also skill abilities for your hero character as well. So as you progress, and there is an actual story here, which again, I love the, you know, classic original storytelling of the first two games. If they can pull off a good story as well, I would definitely say that this is going to be a good game, minus the, you know, simplistic design and jank. And the only downsides I would say is the combat, the graphics, some people might argue, and the lack of the world having that, you know, proper 3D Fable world space, because obviously this is on a much bigger scale, so it kind of lacks some of that detail and exploration, but there are still elements there. So from everything I've seen, Masters of Albion looks like the perfect send-off. Old school Fable is back, classic Fable, a final send-off for this franchise before we get the big new reboot. But at the end of the day, this is a classic mashup of their previous games that they have worked on over time, with their God games as well, their God Hand games. But the people working on this have been in the industry for so long, you know, these are veterans, okay? And they're not pushing out some corporate slop, they're just making something that they care about in the original franchise. And as a fan of that original franchise, I do think this is going to be good, but I understand it's not going to be for everyone, and some of the gameplay might be stale because it's too big in scope. It all depends on how good the story is. But if you like the classic games and you like all of these different systems like reputation, you know, the kind of little dramas that these NPCs can have with each other, and, you know, you deciding their fate, I think you're going to like this. Now, I do think the gameplay might be simplistic and it might overstay its welcome in some areas, but let me know what you think about Masters of Albion, if you're interested in this game or not. This is just from everything that I've seen so far. I thought I would talk about it as no one else is, but remember, this game is nowhere near finished, so even people playing this and giving you a review is going to be based on only what they've seen so far. And that's basically what I'm doing with this video as well. So thank you so much for watching, my wise ones. Let me know what you think about this series and the new Fable and Fable in general and Masters of Albion. And I'll be seeing you in the next video. Have a great day. Peace out.
One of my big motivations is to give everyone at 22 Cans the experience of releasing a game that brings joy. That's really what we want. That brings joy to people.